August 7th, 1998 at 10:30 a.m. A Saudi suicide bomber, Jihad Ali Azam, detonated a truck bomb outside the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, Kenya. 213 people were killed, including 12 Americans. Almost simultaneously at 10:39 a.m., an Egyptian suicide bomber, Hamdan Khalif Allah, detonated a truck bomb outside the U.S. Embassy in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. 11 people were killed, including one American. Fewer people were killed in Tanzania because the U.S. Embassy there was located in a less crowded area, and a water truck parked in front of the embassy absorbed much of the explosion. The East Africa operation was carried out by two separate execution teams, one in Kenya and one in Tanzania. In Kenya, the execution team comprised Azam, the suicide bomber, Muhammad al-Ohali, who rode the truck to the explosion site and exited shortly before the explosion, and Fadil Harun, who led the suicide truck to the embassy in a separate vehicle and who cleaned up the cover apartment after the attack. Azam was killed in the explosion. Al-Ohali was arrested by a Kenyan authority and extradited to the United States. Harun escaped to Afghanistan and continued to work for Al-Qaeda until he was killed in 2009. Fadil Harun, as described in previous chapters, was a black African from the Comoros who joined Al-Qaeda around 1991. He fought with Al-Qaeda's guerrilla units in Gardez and Nangarhar in 1991 and 1992. He worked in the administration of Jihad Wall Camp in Khost. He was with bin Laden in Sudan from 93 to 96. After bin Laden moved back to Afghanistan in 96, Harun stayed behind as part of Al-Qaeda's East African network. Azam, the suicide bomber, was a Saudi who had joined Al-Qaeda in 96 or 97. He was from Mecca, and his real name was Jihad Muhammad Ali al-Harazi. He was the cousin of Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri, who later became the alleged mastermind of the USS Cole bombing in Aden, Yemen in 2000. Al-Ohali, possibly designated as a second suicide bomber, was a British-born Saudi who went to train in Kaldeen in 1996 and who fought on the Taliban's front lines in 1997 before he was recruited to the East Africa plot. In late 1997 or early 1998, they both received mission-specific training in Afghanistan, learning how to conduct clandestine operations. In urban environments, before being sent to Kenya on June 19th, August 1st, and 1998, respectively. When Azam arrived in Nairobi in June of 1998, he was met at the airport by Fadil Harun. Harun did not know Azam before. He is from the generation of the second Afghanistan period, that is, the Taliban period, Harun recalled. They do not know me, and I do not know them. The same was true for al-Ohali. Azam and al-Ohali were young Saudis recruited into al-Qaeda after bin Laden's return in Afghanistan in 1996. Some sources say they were handpicked by bin Laden, but this is hard to verify. What seems certain is that bin Laden in this period actively tried to increase the number of Saudi and Yemeni recruits in al-Qaeda. Bin Laden approached Gulf Arabs already in Afghanistan, such as the Northern Group, a group of Arabs who had tried to join the Tajik Civil War in 1996. Al-Qaeda also approached the Gulf Arabs, who came to train in Kaldeen. As stated earlier, Kaldeen at this time was the only training camp in Afghanistan that offered basic training to recruits regardless of group affiliation. It had strong facilitation networks in Europe and the Middle East, which attracted Gulf Arabs who wanted to fight classical jihad in Bosnia, Chechnya, or elsewhere. All of this suggests that Al-Qaeda's first international operations, Azam and al-Hali, were recruited among Gulf Arabs who came to Afghanistan to train for classical jihad in 1996-1997 period. After being acquainted with Al-Qaeda and its anti-American agenda, they volunteered to carry out suicide missions abroad. They received specialized training in Al-Qaeda camps in Khost and were sent to Kenya shortly before the attacks were to be carried out. 3 operatives in Kenya received support from senior Al-Qaeda members. Fadil Harun, who was in charge of the Kenya cell, above him in command was Abu Muhammad al-Masri, who was in charge of Al-Qaeda's East African network. The East Africa Network was a group of al-Qaeda members who stayed behind in East Africa, mainly Kenya, after bin Laden relocated to Afghanistan in May of 1996. Abu Muhammad al-Masri became in charge of the network after Abu Ubaid al-Banshiri, second in command of al-Qaeda, drowned in a ferry accident off Lake Victoria on May 23, 1996. Abu Muhammad al-Masri has been described as al-Zawahiri's man and the chief bomb maker in the 1998 plot, but this is likely a conflation of several individuals involved in the plot. Abu Muhammad al-Masri was among the original members who joined al-Qaeda in 1988-1989. He was married to the daughter of an Egyptian Islamic Jihad official, but otherwise there are few indications that he was an Egyptian Islamic Jihad member himself. He may have taken basic explosive courses in Afghanistan, standard education for al-Qaeda cadre on his level, but he was not the chief bomb maker, because this was another Egyptian, Abu Abd al-Rahman, who was sent from Afghanistan to Kenya for the purpose. Fadil Haroun described Abu Muhammad as having high religious credentials. He had studied under the famous Salafi sheikh Nasser al-Din al-Albani. In the early 1990s, he had been in charge of the Jihad Wall portion of the al-Qaeda training camp in Coast. After the death of al-Banshiri in 1995, and the resignation of another high-ranking al-Qaeda official around the same time, he rose to become number 3 in al-Qaeda. Other senior al-Qaeda members who supported the Kenya cell directly were Abu Abd al-Rahman al-Mujahir, an al-Qaeda explosive expert, and Mohammed Sadiq Odeh, a Palestinian al-Qaeda member. Al-Mujahir traveled from Afghanistan to Kenya in mid-1998 to help construct the bomb used in the attack. He finished his work the day before the bombings, on August 6, 1998, and left Kenya along with the rest of the al-Qaeda members in the region not directly involved in executing the attacks. Mohammed Odeh was part of al-Qaeda's East Africa network and was already based in Kenya at the time of the bombings. It seemed he was not a vital part of the preparation cell, as he was not involved in the final stages of attack preparations. However, he received massive attention after the attacks because he was one of 4 individuals who were arrested and convicted in the United States in connection with the bombings. His testimony in the case was crucial because it linked Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda directly to the attacks. The attack cell in Dar es Salaam had a similar setup as the attack cell in Nairobi, with separate teams for preparation and execution. The suicide bomber, Hamdan Khalifa al-Awad, aka Ahmed al-Almani, was a member of the Egyptian Islamic Jihad who had taken on explosives courses with Abu Abd al-Rahman al-Mujahir in the early 1990s. He had previously been involved in Egyptian Islamic Jihad's attempt to assassinate the Egyptian president Hosni Mubarak in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia in June of 1995. Thus, he had long experience with international terrorism. It is unclear if he was formerly a member of al-Qaeda. Fadil Haroun said that Egyptian Islamic Jihad had allowed him to carry out operations with al-Qaeda.